What happens when you discover something that shouldn't exist? Dr. Sarah Mitchell had asked herself this question countless times during her 15-year career as an Egyptologist, but never had it felt more urgent than on this scorching afternoon in the Valley of the Kings. The limestone walls around her seemed to whisper secrets that had been buried for millennia, and today, one of those secrets was about to shatter everything she thought she knew about ancient Egyptian burial practices. The anomaly had appeared on ground-penetrating radar 3 weeks ago, a sealed chamber that didn't match any known tomb layout. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she brushed away the last layer of sand and debris from what appeared to be an intact entrance seal. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. Where royal cartouches should have proclaimed the pharaoh's name for eternity, there was only smooth, unmarked stone. Where hieroglyphs should have promised divine protection in the afterlife, there was nothing but blank walls. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. James Harrison, her mentor, as his weathered fingers traced the empty space where identification should have been. His voice carried the weight of 4 decades studying Egyptian tombs, and Sarah had never heard such bewilderment from him. No royal burial chamber was ever sealed without proper identification. It goes against every religious and cultural practice of ancient Egypt. Ahmed Farouk, their Egyptian guide whose family had worked these valleys for generations, stood silently in the corner. His dark eyes held a strange mixture of recognition and fear that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. When their eyes met, he looked away quickly, as if he had seen something he wasn't supposed to acknowledge. The chamber beyond the seal beckoned with an almost tangible mystery. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized they were looking at something that challenged the very foundations of Egyptology. Whoever was buried here had been deliberately erased from history, their identity stripped away with surgical precision. But why? What had this person done to deserve such a fate worse than death itself? To be forgotten for eternity. As the desert wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the whispers of ancient conspiracies, Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. She was going to find out who lay in this nameless tomb, even if it meant uncovering secrets that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to bury. Little did she know that her quest would reveal a truth so shocking that it would rewrite the history books and put her own life in danger. The sealed chamber waited in the darkness, holding its secrets like a clenched fist. But Sarah Mitchell was about to pry those fingers open one by one, no matter what the consequences might be. 3,000 years earlier, in the golden halls of Thebes, a young man named Kheti stood before a mirror of polished bronze, studying features that he was only now beginning to understand. The eyes staring back at him held the unmistakable shape of royal lineage, the same eyes that graced the statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III throughout the kingdom. But Kheti had grown up believing he was the son of a minor priest, raised in obscurity, far from the grandeur of the royal court. The truth had come to him like a lightning bolt 3 days ago, delivered by his dying mother in whispered confessions that shattered his world. "Your father," she had gasped, clutching his hand with desperate strength, "is the God King himself. I was young, beautiful, and foolish enough to believe that love could transcend the boundaries between mortals and gods." Her words hung in the air like incense, heavy with the weight of decades of hidden truth. Now, as Kheti walked through the narrow streets of Thebes, every face seemed to hold a secret. Every glance carried the potential for recognition. Did they see it too? The royal bearing he had always attributed to confidence, the way people instinctively stepped aside when he passed? He had always been told it was his natural charisma, but now he wondered if it was something deeper, something written in his very blood. Meanwhile, in the present day, Sarah Mitchell carefully photographed every inch of the mysterious chamber. Each image revealed new puzzles. The burial goods were undeniably royal. Golden scarabs, precious oils in alabaster jars, and furniture that spoke of divine status. yet everything that could identify the occupant had been systematically removed or destroyed. It was as if someone had performed surgical erasure on history itself. "Sarah, you need to see this," Dr. Harrison called from the antechamber. His voice carried an excitement that made her pulse quicken. When she reached him, he was kneeling beside what appeared to be a hastily covered hole in the wall, a hiding place that the ancient conspirators had missed. In the past, Kheti's heart raced as he approached the palace gates for the first time in his life. He had practiced his words for hours, rehearsing how he would present himself to his father. But as he drew closer to the towering columns and golden decorations, doubt crept into his mind, like shadows at sunset. What if his mother had been delirious? What if this was all an elaborate fantasy born of fever and approaching death? The palace guards scrutinized him with professional indifference until one of them, an older man with scars from countless battles, suddenly stepped forward. "By the gods," he whispered, his face going pale. "You have his eyes. You have the Pharaoh's eyes." The recognition in the guard's voice was like a key turning in a lock, opening doors that Kheti had never known existed. Back in the tomb, Sarah's hands shook as she extracted a small object from the hidden alcove. It was wrapped in linen that crumbled at her touch, revealing a signet ring of solid gold. Her breath caught in her throat as she examined the hieroglyphs etched into its surface. Hieroglyphs that were perfectly preserved, untouched by the systematic destruction that had befallen everything else in the tomb. As Ahmed watched her discovery, his grandfather's words echoed in his memory, stories passed down through generations about a prince who was erased from history, whose very existence had become a forbidden whisper among the families who served the valley. The old man had called him the Ghost Pharaoh, a son of gods who had been condemned to eternal anonymity by those who feared his claim to divinity. The ring seemed to pulse with ancient power in Sarah's palm, as if the soul of its owner was finally ready to speak after 3 millennia of enforced silence. The golden ring felt cold against Sarah's palm, despite the scorching Egyptian heat, as if it carried within it the chill of ancient betrayal. She had spent the entire night studying the hieroglyphs under magnification, and what she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about royal succession in the new kingdom. The name etched into the gold was clear and unmistakable: Kheti, son of Amenhotep III, yet no historical record of this prince existed anywhere in the vast archives of Egyptology. Dr. Elena Rossetti arrived at the dig site that morning with an air of barely concealed suspicion, her designer excavation clothes immaculate despite the desert conditions. "Sarah, darling," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I've heard whispers about your little discovery. Surely you're not suggesting that our meticulous predecessors missed documenting an entire royal prince?" Her Italian accent made the words sound like silk, wrapped around steel. 3,000 years in the past, Prince Kheti faced a conspiracy far more deadly than academic rivalry. Queen Tiye, his father's principal wife, sat in her private chambers surrounded by the kingdom's most powerful priests and advisors. Her beauty was legendary, but her political acumen was even sharper than her cheekbones. "This bastard son threatens everything we've built," she declared, her voice cutting through the incense-heavy air like a blade. "Amenhotep may have acknowledged him in a moment of weakness, but we cannot allow legitimacy to be questioned." Sumo Sacerdote Amenhotep nodded gravely, his aged hands tracing protective symbols in the air. "The boy has the blood, my queen. That cannot be disputed. But blood without recognition is merely potential that can be eliminated." His words carried the weight of divine authority, blessing what was essentially planned murder disguised as religious necessity. In the present, Sarah found herself isolated as word of her discovery spread through archaeological circles. Dr. Harrison, her trusted mentor, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the implications of their find. "Sarah, perhaps we should consider Elena's suggestion to classify this as a noble's tomb," he said during their morning briefing, avoiding her eyes. The political ramifications of challenging established dynastic records could be significant. Ahmed watched these tensions unfold with the wisdom of someone whose family had witnessed similar patterns for generations. That evening, as the archaeological team retreated to their air-conditioned quarters, he approached Sarah with the quiet urgency of shared secrets. "Dr. Mitchell, my grandmother spoke of such things when I was young. She said there were princes whose names were carved from stone, whose memories were fed to the desert winds. She called them the ghost royals, those who threatened the careful balance of power." Back in ancient Thebes, Kheti's recognition by the palace guard had set in motion a chain of events that would seal his fate. Word of the illegitimate prince's appearance spread through the court like wildfire, dividing loyalties and threatening the carefully constructed narrative of divine succession. In the throne room, Amenhotep III faced the most difficult decision of his reign, as his queen demanded justice, and his heart yearned to acknowledge the son he had never known. "You cannot legitimize him," Tiye hissed during a private audience, her royal composure cracking to reveal the calculating politician beneath. "Our children's claims to divinity rest on the purity of their lineage. This boy's existence makes them seem ordinary, mortal. Would you destroy your dynasty for a moment of paternal sentiment?" Sarah's hands trembled as she photographed the ring from every angle, knowing that each image might be evidence in a case that could rewrite history or destroy her career. The hieroglyphs seemed to mock the modern world's attempt to categorize and control the past, holding secrets that someone had killed to protect. As the desert night fell around the dig site, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not just uncovering an ancient conspiracy, but walking directly into the path of a modern one that had somehow survived 3 millennia, waiting patiently for someone foolish enough to disturb its sleep. The translation came to Sarah in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror reflecting an impossible truth. Working by lamplight in her makeshift laboratory, she cross-referenced each hieroglyph with the most comprehensive dictionaries available, her excitement growing with each confirmed symbol. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a royal seal, specifically crafted to legitimize documents and decrees, and the name it bore, Kheti Nechoheka, meant Kheti, divine ruler, a title that could only be bestowed by a reigning pharaoh upon his chosen successor. "This changes everything," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the humming of the generator powering her equipment. The implications crashed over her like waves against the shore. If this ring was authentic and every test confirmed its age and materials, then Prince Kheti hadn't just existed. He had been officially recognized as heir to the throne of Egypt. In the ancient world, that very recognition had sealed Kheti's doom. The young prince had worn the ring for only 7 days before the conspiracy claimed his life, but those 7 days had been filled with a joy he had never imagined possible. Standing in his father's presence for the first time, hearing Amenhotep III acknowledge him as blood of his blood, had felt like awakening from a lifetime of dreams into brilliant reality. "My son," the pharaoh had said, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority as he slipped the golden ring onto Kheti's finger. "You bear my features, my strength, and now my blessing. Let this seal mark your place in the dynasty of gods." The ceremony had been private, witnessed only by a handful of trusted advisors, but the ring itself was proof enough to legitimize any claim Kheti might make. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed insistently, interrupting her concentration. Dr. Harrison's voice carried an urgency that made her stomach clench with dread. "Sarah, you need to pack everything immediately. There's been a development. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities is sending inspectors tomorrow morning. Elena filed a formal complaint questioning your excavation protocols." The accusation stung because Sarah knew it was fabricated, designed to provide legal justification for removing her from the site. Elena's connections in Rome and Cairo ran deep, and challenging established historical narratives apparently made one vulnerable to bureaucratic warfare. James, They can't just shut down a legitimate archaeological investigation based on professional jealousy, Sarah protested, even as she began securing her equipment. 3 millennia earlier, Prince Kheti faced a more direct form of elimination. The poison had been subtle, administered during what he believed was a celebration feast in his honor. As the substance coursed through his veins, stealing his strength and clouding his vision, he realized with crystalline clarity that his royal blood had made him not an heir, but a target. Queen Tiye's smile across the banquet hall was the last thing he saw clearly, beautiful and terrible as a desert sunrise. But Kheti had not been entirely naive. In the days following his recognition, he had sensed the shift in palace dynamics. The way conversations stopped when he entered rooms, the careful distance maintained by courtiers who should have been eager to curry favor with a potential future pharaoh. With the help of Kheti, his childhood friend and servant, he had made preparations for the possibility that his newfound royal status might prove more curse than blessing. Ahmed found Sarah as she worked frantically to document everything before the morning inspection. His weathered face was grave as he approached her workstation, carrying something wrapped in his traditional headscarf. "Dr. Mitchell, there is something my family has kept hidden for many generations. My great-grandfather made me promise to share it only if the Ghost Prince ever revealed himself." He unwrapped a small limestone fragment covered in hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs that perfectly matched the style and era of Kheti's ring. The fragment contained what appeared to be part of a secret burial instruction, detailing how loyal servants should hide evidence of their master's true identity while preserving enough proof for eventual vindication. Sarah's breath caught as she realized she was looking at a 3,000-year-old insurance policy, created by people who knew that truth has a way of surviving even the most determined attempts to bury it. As dawn approached over the Valley of the Kings, Sarah understood that she held in her hands not just archaeological artifacts, but weapons in a war between truth and power that had been raging since the time of the pharaohs. The ministry inspectors arrived like vultures descending on carrion, their black official vehicles kicking up clouds of ancient dust as they surrounded the excavation site. Sarah watched from her tent as Dr. Elena Rossetti emerged from the lead car, her smile triumphant as she gestured toward the sealed tomb that had consumed Sarah's life for the past month. The betrayal cut deeper than any academic rivalry should have, but Sarah was beginning to understand that this was about much more than professional competition. "Dr. Mitchell," announced the lead inspector, a thin man whose English carried the crisp authority of bureaucratic power, "you are accused of conducting unauthorized excavations and failing to report significant findings to the proper authorities. All artifacts must be surrendered immediately for official examination." His eyes lingered on the sealed containers that held Kheti's ring and Ahmed's limestone fragment, the 2 pieces of evidence that could rewrite Egyptian history. In the ancient world, similar forces had converged to eliminate the truth about Prince Kheti. Queen Tiye had worked with methodical precision, deploying teams of skilled artisans to chisel away every mention of the illegitimate heir from temple walls and official records. The erasure was so complete that within a generation, Kheti had become less than a memory. He had become an impossibility that contradicted official history. But the Queen had underestimated the loyalty of those who had known the prince personally. As Kheti lay dying from the poison coursing through his royal blood, Kheti had made a desperate choice that would echo across millennia. Rather than allow his master to be buried in the unmarked grave prepared by the conspirators, he had orchestrated an elaborate deception involving tomb robbers, corrupt priests, and gold enough to buy silence for decades. Sarah's hands moved with practiced speed as she photographed the ring one final time, using a macro lens to capture every minute detail of the hieroglyphs before the officials could confiscate it. Each image was a small act of rebellion against those who sought to control not just her discovery, but the very nature of historical truth. She uploaded the files to multiple cloud servers, ensuring that even if they destroyed the physical evidence, the digital record would survive. "There has been a mistake," Dr. Harrison said, his voice strained as he attempted to negotiate with the inspectors. But Sarah could see in his eyes that he knew the fix was in. Someone with considerable influence had decided that Kheti's story was too dangerous to tell, too disruptive to the careful narratives that underpinned modern Egyptology and perhaps contemporary political structures. Ahmed appeared at Sarah's elbow like a ghost, his voice urgent and low. "They will take everything, Dr. Mitchell. But my family has experience hiding truth from those who would destroy it. Trust me now, as my ancestors trusted the ghost prince." Without waiting for her response, he slipped Kheti's ring from its protective case and secreted it somewhere within his traditional robes, with movements so fluid they seemed like dance. 3,000 years ago, Kheti had performed a similar sleight of hand, switching the prince's body with that of a recently deceased servant before the queen's agents could claim it. The real Kheti was buried with full royal honors in a hidden chamber, surrounded by the treasures befitting a divine heir, while the servant's body was thrown into an unmarked pit to satisfy the conspirators' need for visible elimination. The limestone fragment that Ahmed's family had guarded for generations contained the location of additional evidence. Inscriptions, hidden in places where even the most thorough erasure couldn't reach them. As the inspectors began cataloging Sarah's equipment with clinical efficiency, Ahmed whispered coordinates that had been passed down through oral tradition, protected by families who understood that some truths are too important to trust to official channels. Dr. Elena Rossetti supervised the confiscation with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had won a decisive victory. But she failed to notice the way Ahmed's eyes held the same fierce determination that had once driven servants to risk everything for their murdered prince. The truth about Kheti had survived 3 millennia of suppression, and it would take more than modern bureaucracy to silence it forever. As the official vehicles departed with Sarah's lifework packed in evidence boxes, she realized that she was no longer just an archaeologist who had stumbled onto an interesting discovery. She had become the latest guardian of a secret that powerful forces had been trying to eliminate since the age of the pharaohs. And like those ancient servants, she would have to choose between safety and truth. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the International Conference of Egyptologists in Cairo, her heart pounding with the same rhythm that had driven her through sleepless nights of preparation. The auditorium was packed with the world's leading scholars, journalists, and museum directors, all drawn by rumors of a discovery that could challenge the fundamental understanding of New Kingdom succession. Dr. Elena Rossetti sat in the front row, her confident smile wavering as Sarah began her presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, her voice carrying across the hushed assembly, "I present to you Prince Kheti, the forgotten son of Amenhotep III, whose existence was deliberately erased from history by a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of ancient Egyptian power." The giant screen behind her displayed high-resolution images of the ring, its golden surface gleaming under professional lighting that revealed every detail of the royal cartouche. Ahmed stood quietly in the back of the auditorium, wearing his finest traditional robes, the ring now safely in the possession of the Egyptian Museum, but its story finally free to be told. His family's 3,000-year guardianship had ended not in defeat, but in triumph. The oral traditions passed down through generations had provided crucial context that transformed archaeological artifacts into a complete narrative of royal intrigue and murder. The room erupted as Sarah revealed the hidden inscriptions that Ahmed's family had preserved, the limestone fragments that corroborated every detail of Kheti's brief recognition as heir. Dr. Harrison, who had initially tried to suppress the discovery, now sat mesmerized as the full scope of the ancient conspiracy unfolded before the academic world. Elena's face had gone pale as she realized that her attempts to silence Sarah had only delayed the inevitable revelation. The systematic erasure of Prince Kheti from official records represents one of history's most successful cover-ups, Sarah continued, her confidence growing with each word. But truth has a way of surviving even the most determined attempts to bury it. This discovery reminds us that our understanding of the past is constantly evolving, and that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that someone tried very hard to silence. In the audience, representatives from major museums and universities were already calculating the implications of Sarah's findings. Exhibitions would need to be revised, textbooks rewritten, and entire theories about royal succession reconsidered. The ghost prince would finally take his place in history, not as a forgotten footnote, but as evidence that even in the age of god-kings, human ambition and political calculation could override divine legitimacy. As the presentation concluded to thunderous applause, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. Prince Kheti's voice, silenced for 3 millennia, had finally spoken again through the medium of modern archaeology and the unwavering dedication of those who refused to let truth remain buried. The ring that had once legitimized a prince's claim to divinity had become the key that unlocked one of history's greatest secrets. The Valley of the Kings held many mysteries still, but Kheti's story was no longer one of them. His name would be spoken again, his existence acknowledged, and his death recognized not as divine judgment, but as political murder. In death, the forgotten prince had achieved what had been denied to him in life: immortality, not through divine succession, but through the enduring power of truth to resurrect even the most deliberately forgotten souls.